So I'd like us to begin by bringing our bodies with us into our prayer. So if you could take a moment to assume an attitude of prayer, notice where your feet are drawing their stability from the ground. Notice where your hands pause at rest from their labors. Notice where you're seated. Notice the way your chair or your couch cradles your body. Notice your shoulders, your neck, your arms. Are they tight or tense? Take a minute, roll them out, your neck, stretch your shoulders. Shake the tension out of your arms. Now return your body to stillness. Take a deep breath and hold it. Feel the way your chest and your abdomen and your back all expand to hold in this breath of life. Now release that breath. Allow the tension in your body to release along with it. Breathe in again. And this time, feel the breath entering your chest. Feel it cool, feel it nourishing, feel it filling your heart, wrapping around your heart with life. As you breathe out, feel your heart moving the breath's oxygen through your body. Continue to breathe deeply for just a moment. Focusing on your breath, focusing on your heartbeat, as together we place ourselves in God's holy presence. And if you'll join me now, you can keep your microphone muted, but please pray aloud as you are able. We will speak together out loud our opening prayer. O Sacred Heart of Jesus, we gather here today as embodied people, grounded in our place on this earth, rooted, each one of us, in our own culture, language, and history. As we gather together today on the anniversary of the founding of the Society of the Sacred Heart, to reflect on our collective history, we ask you to help us remember we are more than the minds we bring to this intellectual task. We are more than the emotions that rise within us in this moment. We are more than the bodies grounded in space and time. We are more than the hearts that break open before human suffering. We are all of these things and more besides. We gather as whole people, conscious of the network of relationships and traditions that connects us, even in this virtual space. Conscious that this web of relationships carries our collective story of joy, of success, of community, carries our collective story of faithful, prophetic witness through 222 years of history, and also bears the weight of terrible suffering, violence, and brokenness. O Sacred Heart of Jesus, we bring our collective history of joy and sorrow before you today, with confidence in your ability to transform all things. Help us transform our arrogance to humility, our sharp edges into gentleness, our selfishness into empathy, our confusion into clarity of purpose, and our endless distraction into attentiveness to the truth of your boundless love. Amen. Thank you all, and it is such a privilege to be here with you this evening. And I'd like to turn this over for a moment to Suzanne Cook, the Provincial of the United States Canada Province, who would like to offer a welcome.
Megan, thank you very much for all that you've done to bring us to this evening. I want to thank Emery, Maureen, and Lynn for your stunning, extraordinary scholarship and the humility with which you've shared this with us. To Megan and Aaron, who were able to work with all of you and really bring it to life in a new way on the website. And I want to thank each person here present this evening for your openness to this call that the provincial team is offering all of us to racial reconciliation, not possible without taking the time to step back and really absorb this truth, examine it for myself, and come to some, with the help of the Holy Spirit, insight into my own sense of contrition and desire to move forward. Let us pray, continue this evening of prayer and reflection in that spirit, that together, bound and united in the heart of Christ, we can, in fact, claim this truth and construct a future reflective of Christ's greatest hope for humanity. Back to you, Megan.
Thanks. And Suzanne, it's such a pleasure to just be here and to be in this space and to hear so many people who want to think carefully, precisely, deeply about these questions. It is such a privilege. So I want to invite you right now to ask yourself the question, how am I feeling right now about this conversation tonight? I am going to drop into chat right here another link. This link is going to take you to a website where you can just enter a word. You might enter more than one word if you feel inspired, but just share your word. How are you feeling right now about tonight's conversation and tonight's topic? Let's take a moment to reflect on that. In the meantime, as you are doing that, as you are able, I'd like to say another word about what we're doing tonight and what we're not doing tonight. So tonight we're gathering to process our collective responses to one specific set of stories, right? And they're stories that many folks on this call may have read for the first time this week. Those stories tell some uncomfortable truths about the depths of the society's entanglement with slavery. And so if I am assuming that all of you have had the opportunity to see that, but just in case you have not, I am going to drop another link into chat. And this is, of course, the link to the website where all of those narratives have been published this week. Thanks very, very much to the work of Erin Everson for getting them all on there, and to the authors of the work who we will hear from in just a moment. For many of you here tonight, these narratives are telling some truths that you already suspected or knew about. For others, the truth might be very raw and new and painful. We shouldn't make any assumptions about what someone else might be feeling here tonight. I suspect there's a lot of different emotions that folks are feeling, but our job is to notice how we're feeling about it, how to talk to one another about those reactions, and allow each other's reflections to draw us deeper into our own. So that's what we're doing here this evening. The work of uncovering the society's history with enslavement has been going on for a long time. It's been going on for many years. It's going to go on for many more years. This isn't a final report on all the things that we know. It's a final report on what we know right now. And it's a status report. It's a publication of some findings that have been made along the way in this research. So there's a long labor ahead of us yet, untangling all of the knots that this history has in the society's institutions and culture and language and community life and collective self-understanding. That work of untangling is not our work tonight. There is an anti-racism committee that is forming, that is going to be working on some of these things. There are a lot of people working on these across a lot of areas of the society. That work is ongoing and it's long. Tonight's conversation isn't yet for that work. Tonight's conversation is for sitting with the experience of learning some hard truths, entering into the process of collective lamentation over those truths. So what's lamentation? So lamentation or lament is essentially the collective public exploration of grief. In our culture, we aren't very good at grief. And so we're still a little out of practice when it comes to lament. But facing a history like the one we've been given here, the one we've been reading about, can't really be done until we start first with a long collective pause for lament. In Catholic spaces today, there are very few people who are writing or speaking quite as powerfully about our history of racial injustice as Father Brian Massingale. And it's from him that I've learned about the importance of lament. And I wanted to share this that he has to say about lament. He says, lament is not something that's rational or intellectual. It's much deeper than that. It gives you the passion to continue to work for a justice that will take you into places that you can't even imagine. It makes you realize this is not right. This is not right, and I am not going to let my society define the limits of my convictions and my values and my faith. It goes on to say that when you have a lot of different groups of people who've been defined according to different racial identities and radically different life or social experiences, the experience of lament creates a common space where those groups can start to come together to work to change the system that harms everyone, even though it harms people in different ways. And that common space is what we're trying to create tonight. So it's been the work of a lot of people, quite a few of whom are on tonight's call, to bring this history to light over time. And the most recent set of narratives published this week is the work of 3 primary authors. And so I'd like to invite them now to share a few words about their research and their writing. And so I would like to invite, and I'm not sure if Maureen has joined the call. Oh, she is here, good. So I would like to introduce to all of you the 3 authors whose work is really the reason we're gathered here tonight. So Maureen Shaquin, who is the genealogist and historian and author of many of these narratives. Carolyn Osick, who is the provincial archivist, and who also the author of many of these narratives, and Emery Weber, who is a lay historian and researcher working out of St. Louis, who's been involved in doing much of the research, particularly in the St. Louis Archdiocese. So I'd like to hand it over to all 3 of you, and perhaps all 3 of you might unmute. And we could just ask you to share a little bit about what the research process was like, what surprised you as you were doing the research, and what do you hope that readers are going to see in the work that you've done here?
Do we have an order in which you want us to speak, or do we just jump in?
I think jump away. We're glad to have you.
Okay. I've had lots of surprises in doing this research, some of them pleasant and some of them not. I certainly have learned a lot about the whole evil system of enslavement, and it gave them a face for me. I think it's an abstract concept. You learn about it in history. You learn facts about enslavement and the whole system and how it worked. But I know there are people, Frank and Jenny. I know that Eliza was part of it, and I've gotten to know them. Almost sometimes in doing the research, I felt like I was channeling them. I learned a lot about African-American history and how people moved tracing the descendants. I think the surprise I got, which I wasn't expecting maybe, was a different view of Philippine. And the different view of Philippine was basically, she's kind of on a pedestal. And I had her on a pedestal. And I realized she was very, very human. She got enmeshed, I think, in the sinful structures of her own time. She wasn't able really to understand the moral implications. I think one of the things that I was disappointed in her was, I could see that, she participated in enslavement on the good advice of Madeline Sophie, saint also, and of the bishop. But she never really expressed, and I went through the 2-volume volume of all her letters, any kind of moral surprise, moral judgment of the system of slavery. Her caveats about slavery had to do more with the expense of enslavement to the society, and the fact that enslaved people violated cloister, but she never really came to a sense that this was wrong. And that really bothered me. I must admit, I think I'm still dealing with it. And it affects my relationship with her. But I think in the research itself, the other person that really was a surprise to me was Eliza. And I'm still kind of, I think, thinking about Eliza. She was really our first African-American vocation. We did not accept her. And it was basically because of who she was. And she kind of struggled with her whole identity of who she was, of being Black, of not being able to join the society. But it's like that expression, still she persevered. She continued. She impresses me as a very strong woman who sort of forged her way forward despite all obstacles. And in the end, she won in some ways. She had the vow that she made every year to be a sister of charity of the Sacred Heart. She struggled to do that. She managed to leave us 3 letters, despite the fact we didn't teach her to read or write. So those are the 2 surprises, I think, really for me of doing this research. And I'll yield my floor to one of the other researchers. I want to thank Emory. His work, especially for St. Michael's and Missouri, is just, and for Eliza, he was the one that discovered a lot of information. So thanks, Emory.
You're welcome, Maureen. And if you don't mind, Lynn, I'll go now. I started researching in the Religious of the Sacred Heart archives here in St. Louis in about the year 2001. So I've been at it for a little while, working with the names of the girls who attended St. Michael's School in Convent, Louisiana. For me, this is a very personal activity. I soon realized, looking at the names of those girls who attended over the 100 years that the school was in existence, that many of those names were names of my ancestors. And so those girls were related to me in some way, in ancestrals. And so my ancestors benefited from the labors of the enslaved people that were a part of that convent at the time, and the girls. I also was very much aware from my research on my family from my high school days of until the present time, that my ancestors were plantation owners and business owners, and they used bonded people for their businesses and profited from that. I was born and grew up in New Orleans, a segregated society, and a much racist culture and a racist environment. And so because of that, I, without any way choosing to, I took on the attitude and the mindset of a racist person, probably. For the last 7 years, I've been working with the Archdiocese of St. Louis archives, doing much of the same thing that I did, have been doing with the Religious of Sacred Heart archives, researching and documenting the enslavement involvement of the 2 bishops, first 2 bishops of St. Louis and Louisiana, and have documented the enslaved people that they held, as well as at least 10 priests who were buying and selling men, women, and children in bondage. And we are able to name at least over 100 enslaved people that these bishops and priests held in Louisiana and Missouri. I've become more and more aware of, through this research and through the anti-racism work of St. Francis Xavier College Church that my wife and I have been members of for a number of years now, that I belong to a white church, and a church which has often had, and still in some ways, has a racist leadership, and many members who are racist in their mindset and in their activities. But I consider this activity and involvement to be a special grace and a special blessing at this time in my life. And I hope that I will be able to, both externally and interiorly, to rid myself of the racist attitudes. And for the last year or so, I've been trying to write my own personal racist history and continue to do that. And so I'm pleased to be able to share with you the work that I've done and hope to continue working on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Emery and Maureen. First of all, I want to say how exciting it is to work with these two people. There are always new insights and new evidence that's coming. And Emery, as he says, is now working with the Archdiocese of St. Louis. And every time he comes across something that has to do with an RSCJ, he scans the letter and passes it on. So we've gotten wonderful resources that way. Historical consciousness is very important to me, to try to imagine what life was like in a different time and place. Most of the people on this call know that in my previous life, I was a New Testament scholar. And there I did a lot of work on slavery in the Roman period, in the New Testament context, and in the texts of the New Testament. There are enslaved people all over those texts. And 19th century North America is very, very different. But in both cases, I tried to imagine what was it like to live in a society in which certainly not everybody, but certainly a large number of people considered slavery simply a part of life, and didn't question it, didn't see anything wrong. Well, yeah, didn't see anything wrong with it, basically, but considered it just part of normal life. And I find it very difficult to try to imagine that. And I certainly don't think that Philippine or the first people started out that way, but they got accustomed to it for various reasons. But one of the things that kind of surprised me was within an inhuman situation, the moments of humanity, and Maureen alluded to some of those. I think of the account of someone watching a young enslaved man kneeling for his mother's blessing, or a young enslaved woman acquiring a buggy and horse to set out to visit her grandmother who lived at a distance. Or Xavier Murphy, the superior at Grand Coteau, who had the enslaved man, Frank Hawkins, there, and brought his wife from another plantation so that they could be together. And he, according to the community, the House Journal, when dying, his wife was still alive, and he was dying, and he was looking forward to seeing Mother Murphy again after death. There are these hints of human relationship and humanity in what we cannot in any way consider something that was normal. It all begs the question, of course, which we ask frequently: what are our blind spots that other generations are going to judge us for? And I'm not going to go there now, but it's a question that we ask, I think, a lot. And my last point is about humility, and Suzanne mentioned that. I approach all this with a great deal of humility, because if we don't do that, then I think we're implying that we could have done better. And considering everything that remains to be done, I'm not quite so sure about that. So the story continues. We will keep researching. We will keep trying to find more. But in the meantime, it's good to take stock in a moment like this and just realize where we are and look forward in hope to more.
Thank you, Lynn and Emery and Maureen. It is such a pleasure and has been such a privilege working with you and helping to get these narratives edited and published. It is a real joy to work with such serious scholars. I think everyone who has read this material can see the labor that has gone into it, and I hope that you all appreciate it as much as I do. I'm just very grateful for your work. So we've drafted a series of reflection questions that we've made available online that were provided in advance, and I've also just put into chat a printable version of those questions if you'd like to download it and keep it for reference. And these questions are providing the substance of our 3 small group discussions that we're going to have this evening.